This is a video about that direction. Uh, the fact or my belief that you're born to be good at shit. The purpose is to tell you what I mean by that and how actually you can apply that in your life to actually get better at stuff, get better at any skill that you're trying to get better at, right? Good. So let me start by saying the following. My dogs are here. You know they'll make an appearance, by the way, and Bowie is like complaining, so he'll complain. So you might hear him in the background. But anyhow, so let me start right away. So the first thing that I wanted to tell you is let's talk about what drives us, and that will help me explain why do I think we're born to get good at shit. So the business world has done very good research on what drives us because if you have employees and you want them to be as productive as you can, well, you can throw a lot of money at them, but maybe money is not an infinite resource. And so a good question is like, okay, how do I make these people give me their best work? And so what the guys in the business world have discovered is that if you have a person and you're paying them enough, and your all the things are covered, their lifestyle is covered, most people is gonna be driven by three things to do their best work, and they're gonna be happy, and everything's gonna work very well. You see how you hear Bowie there? Bowie, yeah, cut it out. Anyhow, the first thing that is gonna drive you is autonomy. Is the capacity of doing things on your own and self-directing your journey. That is super important, and in coaching I see that all the time. So if you're coached by me, you probably have heard me asking you like, what do you think we should do next? And it is out of experience. I used to believe that I should tell people what to do, and that didn't work very well. That wasn't very productive most of the time. Like the vast majority of the time, that wasn't very productive. It only worked for people whose identity was that of being the good student and following rules. But then as soon as you get them out of that context, that people didn't thrive. And the problem is that like most of the time, life is not like that, right? Like we're not told what to do with life. Anyhow, so autonomy is a super good driver, and it's an empowering driver. So. That is one thing. The second aspect that the people in the business world has discovered that it drives us very well to do our best is to have a purpose, to have something meaningful, right? So any skill, any work, any project that you're working on should be meaningful to you. Of course, meaning is a personal thing, right? It depends on what is meaningful to you. But it's super important. So I always give the example to people that like, if you spend 9 hours watching TV of something that you don't care, it feels sterile. If you watch 9 hours of TV with something that is very important to you, it's the best day of your life, right? And so it doesn't have to be like deep. It doesn't have to be like anything, super profound. It just has to be meaningful to you, right? And that drives you. And meaning is a complicated thing. We're not gonna go into that. But it has to have some kind of emotional meaning to you. And the third thing is mastery, the urge to get better at skills or to get better skills. And I feel like especially for if you're watching this video, you're probably more on this side of mastery. But this is a super powerful drive. Like autonomy and purpose are very evident. Mastery is not so evident, but it's very common. So I want you to think for a second and think about something that you're really good at, and maybe you're really good at making cookies. I don't know. You love that sensation, that feeling that you have from expressing that skill that you have. It's amazing, and it becomes addictive. You don't need to be the best cooker in the world. You don't need to be an Olympian. I think I'm good at moving, for example, and I love when people think that I'm good at moving, and I am very far away from being anything elite. Anyhow, there's and if you the thing here is that if you manage to actually channel that and become good at something and feel good at something, that addictive a property of that, and addictive is a word that I'm using in at a shallow level, but like that motivating property of being good at something is gonna make you try to make you better and better and better, right? And so that's the main, like when I'm saying you're born to be good at shit, one of the things that most of what I'm saying is we know from very good data that mastery motivates us, and that we all have experienced that. We all love being good at something, and that makes us do better work and get better at it. So you're born to that. Like that is something that we should always be looking for, because we know that that's when we produce our best. And again, I'm not talking about being an Olympian. I'm not talking about being elite. Just about the feeling of being good at something, right? Like that is something very important. One of the things I call these corollaries, and my logic viewers are gonna be like screaming because these are not real corollaries. There's no logical deduction here. But anyhow, one of the things that I have observed is that this desire or this feeling of being good at something is so powerful that I think, in my limited experience with athletes, that most competitiveness that I see comes from the fear of losing that feeling. It's not a conscious thing, but when you have a group of people and you're good at something and you bring somebody else that is good at that same skill, automatically you feel that fear of being good at that is at risk, and that drives you insane, and that drives you to competitiveness. Not all competitiveness is based on this, but lots of it. I actually think that this is a little bit of a sideways, but I actually think that good competitiveness that is just a purpose of competitiveness in which you just want to be better at something than somebody else, right? And it's just there's clear rules and is a little bit detached from your identity. I think that's healthy competitiveness. It's very useful, and most athletes that are very successful are gonna be very good at that. Most athletes that are not very successful have a competitiveness that is based out of fear. Bowie sent something. Okay, Bowie, dude, what's up? I'm gonna let him out. Get out of here. Always interrupting me. Okay. And another corollary that is not really a corollary, but something that I have observed is that we hate not being good at stuff. And we hate it, and that's a light way of putting it. It drives us to very bad places. It lowers our self-esteem, and when we don't feel like we're good at anything, it's terrible. That might seem very obvious, but when you're in a project of changing your lifestyle, when you're in a project of doing something for your life, if you're not thinking about that, if you're not thinking that you have to find some way to make that project work, in the sense that you have to find some way in which you want to make yourself feel good at the thing that you're doing, you're not gonna last long in that project, right? It's gonna make you miserable, and so that is not gonna be a successful project. And so that's one of the things. Good, but more importantly, what I have observed is that, especially when it comes to fitness and nutrition, but in general, I have observed it there more, is that and I observed this also when I was a teacher, but is that when we're not good at something, the first thing to do is we like to blame. That's our first defense mechanism, and we like to blame usually, and this is why this talk is called "You Are Born to Be Good at Shit." We like to blame genetics. We like to blame the fact that I'm not good at this. I wasn't born for this. I don't have the what's required. That is the first thing, and that's just blaming. I don't think everybody is meant to be an Olympian. Definitely not. Just a minuscule, a 0 point. I don't know. You can make the calculation. Just a number close to 0% of the population is born to be an Olympian. That definitely. I'm not saying anybody can do whatever, right? Not everybody can be. If you're not 6 foot tall, you're not gonna play in the NBA. Doesn't mean you cannot get great at basketball. And find that feeling I am good at this shit. Yeah, Probably you're not gonna make it to the NBA, but you can get there. But we like to blame our body, right? Like I'm not good at basketball because I'm not tall enough. You can be 5'7" and be very good at basketball. Anyhow, so that's our first line of defense. And what I have noticed there is that we go right into the, as you can see, I get my directions all wrong. There you go. You can see there. You get into the debate of nurture versus nature, right? Was I born to do this, or do I have what I need or not? And the first thing that you want to notice is that this is always a bad question. This is a false dichotomy. This is a bad abstraction. No, if in real life you could separate both, you could really separate one from the other, it will be a valid question in practical terms. If you want to just think about things that cannot be real, then go ahead and do it. Fine by me. But if you're thinking about your projects and yourself, this is always a bad question. It makes no sense because you cannot have without the other. And so nobody that is good at anything is just because they were given everything and they didn't have to work, or vice versa, right? It's not a bad question. It's a bad question. It creates a false dichotomy. And my experience is the following. For what we want, for most of what we want, for the projects that we want, I have never heard somebody that comes to me and tells me I want to break the 2-hour marathon record. Nobody has told me but people, I have talked with a lot of people that really wants to get good at marathons, and I feel like I have told this to almost everybody that has come to me. I can make a good rower out of anybody. I'm not gonna make an Olympian, or I'm not gonna break records. For that, I need more than just will drive. I need everything well. I had to have that person born in the right zip code, have the time, the money, everything has to align a little bit. But to get good at stuff, for what we want, for the levels that we usually want, of course this is a generalization, you have everything you need. And that is super important in this debate, because usually we go so fast into the nurture by nature that just allows us to quit. That just allows us to say I wasn't born for this, and so I'm just gonna suck. And that's not true. If what I always tell people, if you don't want to develop a skill, don't quit because you think you can't. Just don't want to, right? Just something that you don't want. You don't want to, put in the work that it requires because that doesn't align with who you are, and you have to give your life some different meaning. Fine, but make that decision conscious. Anyhow, so one of the I wanted to break this example here, and it's called the beginner fallacy. Just like there's that fallacy of thinking about nurture versus nature, there's this beginner fallacy that I want to explain here with this graphic. And so this graphic comes from a book called Training from Climbing from Eric Hurst, and it's very interesting because what he says is that that climbing for him is this perfectly even thing in which the mental aspects, the technical aspect, and the physical aspect are all evenly distributed, and you have to be good at the three of them to actually be good at the thing. And he gives two other examples in which he said okay, if you want to get really good at the 100-meter dash, you have to actually be very good at the physical stuff, and the technical and the mental aspects are secondary, right? And in golf he goes the opposite way. And what I have, this is a beginner fallacy, and I call it a beginner fallacy because this is how somebody that doesn't know very much about the 100-meter dash thinks. All they can see is that the physical qualities are the ones that are needed the most, and they don't understand the mental and technical aspects of it. My experience with all this, with talking with coaches from different sports and reading from coaches from different sports and just learning and understanding, is that when you talk with a coach that has enough experience in the sport and you ask them which of these three, physical, mental, or technical aspects, you should work on, they will tell you that you have to expand all those demands of course with the specificity for that given sport. So what Horst doesn't see is that, like, yeah, you don't need to create a lot of force in golf, but you need a very specific physical level of fitness driven towards that sport. Maybe not running, maybe it's not super athletic, but your muscles have to fire in a particular way, and you have to be able to get some ranges of motion. So the physical aspect of it has to be there. And any coach will tell you that in order to get good at any sport, you have to have an excellent, very even balance of these three, right? That is the beginner fallacy. But when we're beginners, we think like Horst. We think like, oh yeah, it's mostly physical. So that's why most people will say like, oh, I'm not good at drawing. It must be that I lack, and most people that I encounter goes to strength. That is where everybody goes, because that is a little bit of a, I think it's a cultural thing. I think it's first that our culture really is very masculine, and so all that they can see is strength. But it's also very simplistic, and is what is more apparent is what they feel they lack strength, right? Sometimes when it's about aerobic capacity, people will say like, I like cardio. You know, again, it's a cultural thing. It's just that we just don't know those two things. It's just that like you know, like either my heart is beating hard or I can produce force, and you know, like we just see the world of movement like that. And so in the beginner fallacy, and you can extend this to not just fitness, although this video is gonna be mostly about fitness. I should have said at the beginning. Anyhow, most people will see that they will feel they live here or here when they're beginners, because that is what they can see, because their eyes are not very well calibrated. And so if you look at golf, you're gonna be like, yeah, this is mostly just technical, and you have to think really hard. Yeah, because you know, like we don't see them sweating, and so we don't understand the physical demands. Of course, the physical demands of golf are very different than the physical demands of weightlifting. And the physical demands of weightlifting are very different than the physical demands of running. Okay, let me give you one last example. Olympic weightlifters always think that they're way more technical than powerlifters, but if you spend enough time with a powerlifter, all you're gonna be talking about is technique. Anyhow, so that's why I call the beginner fallacy, and it translates. When we extend it a little bit, it translates to this. It translates to, we believe that the most important, when we're beginners, we believe that the most important aspect on getting good at something is usually biological. Then we say it's mental. And then the last thing, this is of course this is completely what I have observed. This is based on my observations and what I have read. But of course this graph is just to explain an idea. So please don't believe that I'm claiming more than that. But most of the time, at the end, the least important thing for most of us is behavioral. We don't think it's about our behavioral thing, because we like to blame, and we can blame our biological, we can blame our minds, because we can think we will power everything, and we never blame our actions, or we blame them very little. So I'm not good at drawing because I haven't practiced enough drawing to be as good as I want to be, right? Like it's never about that. It's always about like my legs are too short. Anyhow, so that is the beginner fallacy. The coaching reality is the opposite. Is that when you work as a coach in making anybody better, you know that in order to maximize performance and to get people to be good at something, you have to work on all of them. You have to work on the biological aspect. That probably means nutrition. That probably means fitness. And you have to give them the specific aspects of it. You have to work on the mental aspect. So if you don't work on their mindset, and if you don't work on their how they handle emotions and so on, they're not gonna get good at anything. And you definitely, most of the time, have to work on how they behave and what they fucking do in life. And so I think this is the coaching reality. I'm always talking about coaching from a self-coach point of view. I want you to be able to self-coach yourself. Anyhow, so that's the first thing. So to be good at something, and this is what we have learned from the coaching, from the best coaches in the world. To be good at something, not to be elite, you have to always be working on all these areas. That is the first thing, right? So we love being good at something, And usually when we're good at something without trying, we don't see that we actually were working on these three things, right? And that's usually a miss, right? And so when we're just good at something and we don't try to get good at something that we're not good naturally, we never are able to see these three in play. We never are able to make this happen, and so we lose that experience, and that's a sad thing. But if you keep this in mind, if you keep in mind that like to get good at anything, you have to work on these three aspects. And I'm sure this model is limited, but you know it will suffice. That is an important distinction. Good. Good. One thing that I want to finish with, and this is important, is this graph also comes from Hurst, and is very has been very illuminating to me to explain something to people, and is if you understand the dotted line as like your current capacity on any skill, and you understand the black line as your potential, how good can you get? What we want in life, no matter what we want in life is to move those dots. When we want to get good at something, is to move those dots as close as we want to the black line. And we tend to believe that the difference between our potentials is very big, and that is not the case. So for sure, everybody has a different potential line. This is the truth. Cannot do anything about it. And that potential, I want to be honest with you, I don't think is that we gave genetics way too much power. I think where you were born, to the family that you were born, is gonna give you a bigger line right away. If you're a person like me, very privileged, that like I was born in Colombia, but I still was born in a very privileged family. My potential line is better than like most people in Colombia, just because I had better learning experience when I was a kid, just because I was born in the right zip code. Period. Has nothing to do with my bone structure. The fact that my mother was well nurtured and had very good access to food, and I did too when I was a kid, fucking doesn't hurt, right? And it's probably way more important than my genetics. Anyhow, so potential is, we usually just understand that genetics, and I call bullshit on that. But anyhow, not that it doesn't matter, of course it does. And we have good data to know that genetics have an impact. Of course, I'm not denying that. I'm just saying that there's way more factors there that we haven't taken into account. Good, but this graph is very useful for the following reason, and is that I think most people get so fixated about the difference in between the black lines, and gets very little fixated and works very little on actually where the dot line is. And it's just because of that fallacy of like the genetic component, or like, am I good at this, or like I'm too heavy for this shit, or whatever it is. And they don't see that like a good athlete, like a random person that like works in expanding these three areas will expand this circle. And it doesn't matter what your potential is, these two dotted circles are the same, right? And so they're the same. This one looks bigger just because the black one is bigger. That's an optical illusion. They're exactly the same. So it doesn't matter what your potential is. What matters is where you push these circles. And again, as a point that I made back in some slides before, is like for most of what we want, we don't need to be elite. We don't need this to be here. Like we need just the circles to keep growing. And that's super important, because that sensation of feeling good is fantastic. I always use my example as something for athletic. I'm a half decent athlete, and I didn't have a background on anything. I have my background on athletics are like, I played some soccer when I was a kid, and maybe run some track, but very little. Colombian sports, the school that I wasn't very competitive, and sports were like considered a little bit of a not very intellectual pursuit, and so like not very important. After high school, I just did a lot of drunk dancing, a lot of drugs, and a lot of cigarette smoking for like 10 years. And I didn't do any sports. And in the past 10 years, I have gotten to do a lot of skills and a lot of good that I'm good at. And I'm in a way nowhere near any, professional at elite level, but I feel good at shit, and that is fantastic, and that drives me a lot, and that has helped me build a business in which I help people do the same, and I have managed to do that. And again, just trying to push these dots towards this black line is the magic, and making sure that like we're pushing this evenly, and assuming that we need these three, right, to be evenly. That's why these dots are like in that nice graded color there that it took me so long to program. Anyhow, so what to do, and this is important. What you need to push your circle out, right? And so that's what we were saying there. We need to push the dotted circle towards the one. That's what matters, and that's actually what makes you. That's what drives you, because when we're getting close here, we feel it, and that's amazing. That's an amazing feeling. The second thing is that we know what drives us to be good at, and we know what drives us, and we know that this is a cycle, right? And so focus on mastery, purpose, and autonomy. So autonomy is all about learning. Autonomy is all about self-directing your journey, and for that you need to be learning, and for that you need to be observing. And so one thing that people don't do enough when they're working on any skill, I'm talking now fitness again because that was the purpose of this point of this video, is they don't track what they're doing. People don't track what they're doing, and so you cannot be autonomous if you're not learning, if you're depending on somebody else, if you're not doing the research, if you're not taking notes. The simplest action that you can take today to get good at a skill that you're trying to master is to write down and take some notes. I don't even want you to have a plan. I don't even want you to have like a good program. If you're not taking notes of what you're observing or what you're doing, you are not gonna be autonomous, because you don't know what's going on. You cannot rely on memory and feelings. You have to rely on observation. So observation is gonna tell you what you're doing, which is gonna lead you to learning, which is gonna lead you to autonomy. If you depend on somebody else like me, for example, you're never gonna get to autonomy. So observe, write down, analyze, move forward. Second thing is purpose. If something is not meaningful to you, if you haven't done the exercise of thinking why are you doing what you're doing, how this is adding value to your life, this is not, you might be doing shit that you don't really like. You might be getting off of something that is short-lived, right? And so you're gonna have short-term success instead of sustained success, which is what we always drive towards. And so purpose is important, and the first thing that you should do, apart from having a fucking journal, which is the first thing, and actually the second thing, is whatever skill or project you're working on, decide how is it going to add value and how does that align with who you are. Simple questions. You don't have to spend more than half an hour with that, but make sure you're doing that. And then focus on mastery, right? And mastery is, in order to get it at a skill, you have to focus on the fundamentals instead of being looking forward where you are not there, when you're not yet, right? Like always looking at like, I want to get a muscle up, but I'm so far away. Look at the basics, look at the foundational skills that you need, look back, don't level up. Make your foundations every day better. This is especially true in fitness. If all you can see is like lack of strength, is because you haven't refined your movement. Go and refine your movement. I don't care what the sport is. Every coach will tell you the same thing. So focus on the fundamentals, focus on the basics, and always be a beginner with the basics. Coach Glassman had an awesome phrase there that is like, when you feel that you have mastered the fundamentals, go back to them and do them again, and this time pay closer attention. And it's not a scolding. It's just the fact that now that you have more experience, if you go back to those fundamentals and you pay more attention, you're gonna get better at them. And those are the things that transfer. The more solid the tree, the more solid the roots are, the better the leaves are. Instead of going for the leaves, go for the fucking roots. Good. And the last thing is commit. The last thing you should do to get good at shit and like is just commit to it. It's just commit to get good at it. Commit to like take the time that it's gonna take. Commit to saying no to other stuff, right? To something that we say yes, especially if we're gonna get good at that thing, we're gonna have to say no to other things, and that's fine. But that requires commitment. That requires that you put your effort on that. And doing these things, you will definitely get good at something, and you will feel better as a human, because we are born to be good at things. That is something that like drives us, is something that keeps us working, is something that keeps us moving, right? Eh, Nothing kills momentum like feeling that you are not good at something. Like that is it. So that is it. I hope this video helps you. I think you can apply these three things. Get a journal. Make sure that your project has a very clear purpose. Always look at the fundamentals. And in your journal, if you're already having a journal, how to look at the fundamentals, pick one. Simple task. Pick one for the next month. And write it down in your journals, and write down how you're gonna be looking. Just looking at it. You don't even have to change anything. Just pay attention. Put your attention there in those fundamentals. And that will give you automatically a purpose of autonomy and mastery. That will drive you to something better. And just keep working on that. Keep just committing to that same action of observing, committing, and that will get you to be good at something. I can guarantee you that. And just the feeling of getting good at something, it's gonna drive you, because we're born for that. We're not in the question of nurture and are we born to draw? Yes, you're born to be good at drawing. You are. You're not born to break world records. I can guarantee you. If you're watching this, chances are so little that you're a world record holder that I can guarantee you that you're not born to break world records. But that's not what you want. But you can get really good at it. You're born to be good at it. You will love to be good at it, and so it's just about putting the right kind of work and committed to the thing, right? And just the feeling of being good at it, regardless if you're better than anybody else, is gonna be fantastic, right? Because again, being good at something does not come from a competitive point of view, right? Like that, just fear of losing that feeling. And so that is it. Hope you like it, and talk to you soon at some point.